Hello, and welcome to the podcast that discusses all things gaming. Coming to you from the home of Indie PopCon, Gen Con, and the gaming capital of the world, we are The Established Facts.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 196 of The Established Facts. I'm today's host, Josh, because Big Don is again running his role-playing game. And if you didn't know, we record more than one episode in a sitting. So
I thought we just caught him on another bad day.
Exactly. Part two
of
the same.
That or this game has been going on for 2 weeks, and he's been stuck in a really bad dungeon, which I guess is totally
lair.
possible.
Or
lair, as we discussed last time.
So true.
So before we continue, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. This time I'll start across the table.
I'm Lance.
I'm Dr. Deb.
And to continue the repetition, I'm Josh as well.
Continuing the repetition.
Continuing the repetition. I'm repeating my continuity.
You're repeating your repetitive statement.
Absolutely.
Again.
Repeatedly.
Over and over.
This is redundant.
We're actually just going to pick right up where we left off on our last episode because we've been discussing building a dungeon and what things to consider, tips and tricks, things we enjoy. Overall, just having a conversation. We also did a versus topic last time of encounters versus exploration, and now we are just exploring the encounters in depth. I'm sorry, I had to continue on.
If you didn't get a chance to listen to that, please go back. It will make a whole lot more sense once you do.
Yeah, we advise not listening to this before you listen to the one before it, unless you don't like yourself, in which case, keep listening. But
yes, if you don't like yourself, keep listening.
Correct.
Those thoughts in your head aren't worth it.
Exactly.
Right, and we love you.
And we love you anyway.
Please don't sue us.
And we'll see you tomorrow. All right, so we were talking about the occupants of a lair or a dungeon. We want to know, first of all, is it occupied? And second of all, by whom or what?
Wouldn't it be nice if right on the front of the dungeon it just said occupied or not occupied?
Mm-hmm.
Like
a number of occupants. Like the number changes. Like, 47, 52, 41.
Something bad happened in that room.
Exactly.
Number of occupants per room, like on the outside of every door.
Yes.
There are 15 monster, 14 monster, 13. It must be the Donner Party in there.
Suggested challenge rating, 4.2. Oh, 5.6. Something just happened. Whoa, down to 2.9.
It'd be a terrible spell.
It's awesome.
Please show me the challenge rating of this room.
Oh, this room.
Yeah, Superman in your party. He's just X-ray visioning. We're not going in that room.
Yep, no.
Why? I'm not going to tell you.
Not going to tell you.
Because you'll want to go in the room.
Spoilers.
It's lead lined, which means they don't want me in there anyways.
That's right. Any room they line with lead, I'm not going in. There's kryptonite.
Exactly.
I'm 100% sure of it.
Always.
Occupancy. So why are they there?
Why are they there is a big, important question. But first of all, who is there? Do you have monsters? Do you have mortals? Do you have immortals? Undead things.
Like, do you have corpses? Do you have rotting corpses? Do you have corpses that haven't rotted?
That's more like scenery, but yeah.
I mean, that kind of matters as well, because is there going to be searching the bodies for stuff? Are they going to leave the bodies alone because they believe in not
Are the bodies
messing with the dead? Right. Are they recent? If their clothing looks like they're from 200 years ago, but their bodies have not decayed at all,
They're
that
just
might be
sleeping.
Something odd. Yes, that is a sleeping spell. They're all Snow White.
They're waiting for you to pass by, and then they're going to attack you from behind.
Pretty much, yes. All of the above. So there's ideas.
Also want to know, does it make sense? And this is an important thing. Does the thing being there make sense? I mean, if you're in an underground tomb type lair, having a bunch of undead, that makes a whole lot of sense. But if you're in an underground undead thing, you have a giant eagle in a room, you have to explain to me how it got there and why it's there. Because just having it there so that you can say, oh, I've got this big and giant counter so that you guys can face it. Great, but that bird's not going to fly. Unless the room is big enough for it to fly in. It's just there so that you could say, I looked at the monster manual and I got to the letter E.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, the random encounters table that has existed in many different fantasy RPGs kind of puts you in that situation, but as a game master, definitely do your best to make it make sense. You know,
you have the ability to say, no, I'm re-rolling that.
True. You do. Or you can go, I'm rolling, and then look at the table and go, we're choosing that one. We're not looking, most of the time, we're not looking at the game master's rolls. Most of the time.
It also has to make sense that it's there for your players, because they don't want to just randomly encounter something that could kill them when they're starting out, right? A story goes, Tracy Hickman was in a dungeon that his friend was running, and all of a sudden they came upon a vampire. They weren't that high level, but they came across a vampire, and a vampire is a very big thing to encounter at low levels. But second of all, why would a vampire just be roaming around a random dungeon? Don't they usually, I don't know, control the dungeon? They're kind of a big deal. So that's why he built Ravenloft. It was, I ran into a random vampire, didn't understand why he was there. I decided to know this is where the vampire is and why he's there. So have it make some sense, not only to you, but to your players. If there's a vampire just roaming your dungeon, you better have a good explanation. Did he accidentally walk in and got trapped? Are there crosses all over the room? He can't escape the room? Can he not turn to gaseous form? And if that's true, why can't he? Or she, I guess.
True. You know, it's the vampire is a great description. A great. I'm thinking of the wrong word. It's not option. Selection's not right either. Example. That's the word. Is a great example of a monster that really does, in most cases, need a reason. There are some monsters that don't. Goblins literally show up anywhere. Kobolds pretty much show up anywhere. Because they don't care. Because they're a scavenger monster. You know, they're taking advantage of the situation.
Then in that case, it would make sense because they've just kind of scavenged or found their way in, right? So there is still a reason for it being there. Whether it be we were hungry and we looked for some food, we smelled something, so we came over here. There was a thing, we fought it and ate it. And we just kind of stayed here because our bellies were full. Now you have a reason for being there.
Yep.
Again, you don't want to get into the psychology of every particular being that's in your dungeon, your lair. But think about those kind of things. It's important for it to make sense to your players.
Yeah, because the characters will ask. They'll want to know what's going on.
If they've encountered 3 things that are about the same, they can understand, all right, this is kind of what we're going to see. If a bunch of zombies are in a particular area, all right, we can expect there to be more zombies here. But if all of a sudden we encounter a white dragon, all right, that's random. I'd want to know how it got there. What's its purpose? Deb, what do you think?
Well, sorry, I had to step away for a moment because there was a minor tablet emergency. I think that things making sense is always good by my very personality. If it doesn't make sense, I'm going to be digging around trying to figure out why. And if there really isn't a why, then I'm wasting my time and the DM's probably getting a little ticked off at me because I keep trying to dig, like, why is this thing here? Like, it's just there. Like, I think I remember being in a game where somebody was finally like, look, there's no reason why, it's just there. And I remember going, oh, okay. And I was kind of let down
well,
because
then I'll just roll my dice and we'll look at numbers.
Exactly, pretty much. I was like, well, all right, if that's as much thought as either you put into it or whoever made the module put into it, I don't remember which. I was like, okay, fine, whatever. And it kind of took some of the wind out of my sails because I thought it was an investigative point. So you could do that if your point is that there's a reason why and you want them to dig into the puzzle of why this is what it is. Absolutely. But I've had several experiences where it's just there and it doesn't make any sense, but it's just there. And I'm like, really? No. Just someone should have been fired for that one. It doesn't even make any sense. So it does need to make sense. Think it through. Run it by somebody else. Be like, this is my thought process. I was going to put this in, get one of your gaming friends over and run it by them. And if they're like, no, dude, I wouldn't understand why it's in there. Okay, you need to rethink it. But if you explain the thought process, then, bounce ideas off people and see if it makes sense to other people, not just in your own head. And
that brings us to another point. your challenge rating by tier. We've already talked about the challenge rating of a tier. You want to make sure that you have appropriate leveled creatures for your characters. So you walk into a dungeon or a lair, easier usually at the beginning, and then the deeper you delve or the higher you ascend, the harder things tend to get until you get to the ultimate big bad thing towards the end, or the BBG, as some people like to call it. It's okay, as Josh said, to have a few more difficult encounters, but you don't want to have a vast difference. You don't want to have the tier level be between 3rd and 4th level, and all of a sudden you throw in a 19th level thing, unless you're wanting your players to escape. And if that's the plan, you have to make sure that they are able to, and there is a way to do that.
Or that the 19th level creature runs away itself, although why a 19th level CR would run away leaves some head scratching. But, I mean, they could run away as long as you've got a decent story of why they're doing that. I would think at that level they would just eat you all for breakfast, so there would have to be a good story reason why they would do that.
Well, and tiering it also is expanding based off the number of players and based off what effective party level they are. I mean, a lot of the Pathfinder Society encounters, scenarios, dungeons, layers, whatever you want to call them, can modify based off what players are at the table. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're playing a tier 1 to 5, but all your players are first levels, they're going to be dealing with a lot less issues than all players are 5th. It becomes a lot more difficult.
We call that scaling.
Right.
Right. So we scale the encounters down, or we can scale them up. If your party is just breezing through your dungeon and you want them to slow down and notice something, then maybe you can scale things up. So that level 5 monster now becomes a level 6, 7 challenge rating. That way, it's a little bit more difficult. Maybe you give it a few more special abilities. Maybe you make it immune or resistant to some of the things that they use as their go-tos. If the party is always saying, okay, wizard, fireball, and then we'll go into the room, next thing is immune to fire. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, they have to switch up their plans, and maybe they start thinking again.
Does that go along with timing? I don't know if timing is a separate category inside there, but thinking through how long something is actually going to take a party to do. If you have a room that's full of a lot of small creatures, now each one's easy to hit, but you've got to hit a lot of them. Are you going to force them to hit and kill every single one of those little things? That could take a lot of time, as opposed to 2 or 3 bigger things. So, because I can imagine, I mean, we've been in some battles where there was lots of stuff, and every single person takes a turn, and I think we've been in some battles that took, an hour for us to get through the battle, to get through all the turns and everything. So you might want to think about that, especially if it's just a one-shot. You don't want everyone to spend all their time in one room of your dungeon. I mean, unless you do, which is an interesting hypothesis. But thinking through your timing of how long in a practical way is this actually going to take a party of 4 third-level characters or whatever.
True. Oddly, though, you can you can plan, like, this should take an hour, and to take 2. Mm-hmm. Or this whole session's 4.5 hours, and they finish it in 40 minutes. It's
If that happens, you can do what some GMs do, and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to call it. I don't have anything planned. Or you open the sandbox and you allow for something to happen. Your players will actually give you some of the best material at your table. Sometimes someone will say, now if we go through that door, something big's going to be there, so we're going to go this way. Well, maybe that way they've already defeated everything. They try to move on. It's blocked. They have to go back through that door. You didn't have anything behind that door, but now you do.
Right.
Now you've got something big behind that door.
They just told you that they imagine something big, make their imagination come true.
Now, a tricky thing that some GMs, DMs will do is they'll put something very small in that room that they think that the big thing is in. They go through, and it should be really easy, but it's not for some reason. You know why? Because it's not really a small thing. It's just a thing that has been made to look like a small thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or fairies. Pixies and fairies.
Oh, yeah.
They can be dangerous.
Love them.
Hate them.
Can because they're hard to hit. You know, there's all kinds of things.
Swarms. You can think of swarms the same way.
Yes.
They're small, but they're hard to hit unless you're using
An area
bashing
of
or a
effect.
net.
Right.
Right, or spells, yeah. Magic with their
Area of effect spells, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So be thinking about those kind of things in the challenge rating of your room. Also, like I said before, you can make a creature a little bit stronger by giving it special abilities, changing its offense and defense, but also be aware that sometimes a solitary creature can be enough. If you've got a creature that its primary thing is to charm others and make your players fight each other, then its challenge rating can go right through the roof. Where it's small, it's maybe just a level 2 or 3 something, but it can get your players to fight against each other. That should raise its challenge rating to about the same as theirs, so doubling it.
Well, and it kind of goes back to what you mentioned earlier in part 1 about who's building the dungeon. And I'm not talking about the game master. I'm talking about the owner of said lair. You know, if it's built by, if it's a cave that a dragon found and there just happen to be rooms in it caused by erosion, it's one thing. But if you find a dwarven made stronghold or an underdark city or town that have been managed and handled by drow, there are certain things that are only going to be present there. You're not going to find a tribe of halflings hanging out in a suburb of Bensabranson. I mean,
unless there's a good reason, but
right.
You have to come up with that good reason.
Right.
Correct. It's really got to stretch that one, but yes, you're absolutely right. Those poor halflings would be Drider lunch. Like, I don't know what in the world they're doing now.
Well, they're so small that maybe the Driders don't pay attention to them, so they can get through. I mean, one little halfling got by a Smaug.
It's true.
It's very true. Da, 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 da.
Of course, he was invisible.
Yes, he was.
There is that.
Yeah, and he kind of had, the ring of power. But other than that, meh.
The One Ring. Yep.
An O-ring. Another thing let's think about, if there are occupants, what are they eating?
Air.
Yeah. For a quick one-shot dungeon, that's nothing to worry about. But if you're getting into the makings of it, is there water inside this layer? If there is, that's great, because then you can start your own ecology. Where there's water, usually there can be some kind of moisture. Moisture breeds fungus. Fungus can be eaten by something that can be eaten by something bigger than that,
right.
and so on and so forth. So your Minotaur
science.
can be sustained. Otherwise, you come into this dungeon that's been there for a while, and everything you encounter is emaciated and dead because it's all starved to death.
Do they have a storeroom? Do they have an armory?
Do they have a meat
kitchen?
machine?
Do they have a bathroom?
Come
And
on
yes,
now, people.
That was in one of the dungeon levels of the
was.
Emerald Spire. There was a room that was the bathroom. Now, mind you, it was literally just like a cave room where they just went and...
Cesspit.
Yep.
Yeah, but guess
But
what?
you know what? It was a detail that I actually respected because there are people living down here. This is their area. And
that makes sense.
yeah, they had a kitchen. They had effectively
Area to sleep in. They
barracks.
Had like barracks.
a mess hall. They
very
and
practical.
They had a toilet area.
As we've learned, though, if there is a toilet, make sure it's not a mimic.
That's right.
Oh, gross. Thank you. Yes, thank
Walked
you.
into the bar. We told some stories. Bartender laughed. I laughed. The table laughed. We killed the table. It was all fun.
It was all fun. Exactly. Sounds like a regular old boring day in the life of an adventurer.
Freaking mimics.
Ugh.
You could make a whole dungeon of just mimics.
Oh, that'd be
Nobody would know
terrible.
what to do.
That would be
I saw a
awful.
picture of a pirate ship that is a mimic, and I showed it to someone in the Reddit subforums, and they built an encounter based on it. Like, this pirate ship that eats other pirate ships.
That's awesome. And terrible at
Call
the
it the
same time.
Kraken. Then the
Aw.
Kraken would be offended.
The Quacken.
The Quacken?
The Quacken. The McQuacken. I don't know.
Scrooge McDuck's
It's a giant duck.
mimic
It
ship?
is. Yeah. Dude, Scrooge McDuck. You know he'd do it if he thought he'd get some gold out of it. Anyway.
No, that'd be something that Scrooge McDuck would have to go get a treasure from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
McQuacken.
That's true. That would be worth his
And
time.
what's the name of the sorceress on that show?
Hold on.
Oh, my goodness.
She would be the
Violet.
one that was
Yeah.
controlling it.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
Oh,
I can
my.
see her.
Yep. I'm failing on it. We'll have to look it up.
It starts with an M.
It starts with an M.
Magica Dispel.
Yep.
There it is.
There it is.
Woo! Magica Dispel. Ha.
I'm proud of her.
Thank you.
That was good.
Yes.
So I wouldn't have caught that.
Love DuckTales.
Google
Love it.
would have been my friend.
Love DuckTales.
All right. So that any more on occupancy?
Well, yes.
Good.
How many people or things are there? in the bestiary, the monster manual, most of your books that have your challenging encounters in them, it tells you about their ecology. Are they usually solitary? Do they come in pairs? Are they an organized tribe of things? If you see one kobold, what do you think?
Something ain't right.
It's lost.
Do you usually think there's only one kobold?
Nope.
No.
Like cockroaches, right? If
Right.
you see one, you know there's more than one.
Swarm around.
But if you see one giant spider, there might only be one giant spider. Mm-hmm. So be aware of,
I still don't
if I'm
think
going to
so.
put something in there, is it usually by itself? Mm-hmm. Does it usually have a partner? Does it usually come in large groups? These are things to think about. Are they hired, or did they wander in? Did the person that built the thing put them there, or did they find their way there? You may find a bunch of NPCs that were once adventurers that got lost and stuck. And they've been down there so long that they've gone crazy, and now they're part of the monsters that you would encounter. Mm-hmm. So think about those kind of things. What do you think about hired versus wandering monsters? By wandering, I mean wandered in.
I think both serve a good purpose. Stemming again from who built the dungeon. If this dungeon or lair is because some wizard has gone mad and he is collecting power to overthrow the world, he's probably going to hire his guards. But if it's a newly formed lich or a vampire who's just trying to establish himself, he might have a few. But then again, if he's not very good at it, he's going to have a lot of monsters just wandering in, because giant spider, for example, is going to look for a dark and dank place to sleep, put up its eggs, whatever it needs to do. So it may just wander in, and that it's in this cave. So there's a story element just in that. Whoever built it is gonna have to protect it. And whether that's by coaxing monsters, come on in, the weather's fine, or actually paying someone to protect is two different things. Because when you're dealing with someone who's being paid, they can be bribed, especially if they are of evil intent.
Like, so you've got a very smart person who built the thing, and they're very susceptible to, say, stabbing by pieces of wood. Wouldn't you want to put something in there like a gelatinous cube that would eat away at biological material like wood, so that maybe it's harder for someone to come in and stab you with a piece of wood? Mm-hmm. Vice versa. Mm-hmm. You can put a rust monster in there so that the metal that people are wearing gets eaten up, and now all of a sudden their armor class is lower, making you easier to defeat. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing.
Mercenary is the mercenary, because I think mercenary, I might be able to. Bribing is one, but if you show of force, you might be able to get the mercenary to run away. Because it might be like, this is not worth what I'm getting paid or what I'm getting out of it. I tend to think that the sense of self-preservation in a mercenary of, I'm getting paid, but I'm not getting paid to die. Because if I'm dead, I can't spend my money, so I'm running. As opposed to something that's not getting paid, it's there and it may go down with its ship, so to speak. I mean, if this is its survival, I'm more scared of something that's there for its survival than something that's there for gold. Because there's always a higher amount of gold. And can you spend gold if you're dead? No. So if I find out these are a bunch of hired mercenaries, either a show of force, or if I got a lot of coin in my pocket, gonna get me out of that. As opposed to, this is this animal's home, and it's gonna defend it to the death. I'm way more nervous about it. So that, to me, that matters. Are your mercenaries bribable? Are your mercenaries, how much are your mercenaries getting paid? If a number is presented to them, is that going to be like, oh yeah, I'm interested, or no, way too low? Kind of keeping that in mind, because you got a good bard who's got a really good, diplomacy skill.
Or your lair could be built by one of the more powerful necromancers who's just raised a family and wants them to be able to protect him as well.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Put on raise the family. I dig it.
Every time I see that, all necromancers want to do is raise a family and be left in peace.
Yep.
Raise a family in pieces. Yeah,
and raise a family in pieces.
The thing about mercs, though, you can never quite tell if they're on your side. If you say, well, I can pay you double, that's great and that's fine. what makes you think they're not just going to take your money
Right.
and then double cross you at the end because
Exactly.
the big bad thing is going to pay them anyway?
Right. Yep. Very true.
And another thing, what if they're enslaved? What if they don't want to be there, but for some reason the thing that built this or a thing that inside it has enslaved it? We talked about a creature that can entrance. What about a creature that has been enslaved to be there that can't leave even though it wants to?
Well, it depends on the motivation of the one that's enslaved in that instance. Because if they're motivated to become free, then we have to work towards. You want to be willing to work towards that freedom. Like as the game master, you're building this dungeon, and you have this villain who has enslaved all of these people. You are
So slavery is an evil act
right.
to you.
Well, in that instance, are you setting up your players to free those enslaved? Or is it just to find out where their moral boundary is? Like, that's, if you're going to use something like enslaved, usually it's because it's a story reason. Right?
I think we're sensing a very long string of the same word being used.
Oh, story?
Story, yes. There should be a story reason for just about everything, person, thing, animal, creature, trap, whatever, that's in your dungeon.
So
if
it
doesn't
shouldn't
fit
be
a story,
just because I said so?
typically not. Again, a one shot is different, but if you're delving and you're making it a really good layer encounter, then yes, things should have a story reason. And if they don't, it doesn't take very long to come up with a reason, as long as you can think on your feet. That improv classes that people talk about are really good for giving you that, oh, I didn't think about that. Well, here's why.
Interesting. I don't think I would purposely ever build a dungeon with enslaved characters or enslaved NPCs. I don't know if I ever would purposely. Now, playing in one that I've got to deal with that, I don't think I would ever think about that personally. Like, I want to make sure that all of the people working here are enslaved. Like, I don't know if I'd ever do that.
Well, like you've got a boiler room down at the bottom. And the only reason that the fire keeps going is because you've got a group of people downstairs turning a grind wheel that pumps air all the way from the surface down to there that fuels the air to the fire. The fire then creates heat for the entire building.
Right.
Well, you can pay someone to do that, or you can just get a whole bunch of adventurers that didn't quite make it, lock them down there, and if they don't, then they die.
It's true. That's true.
But again, story reasons. And I can come up with that stuff off the top of my head.
Right.
It's up to the people that are listening to this to be able to do that.
Yeah. What else you got? I love the preparation you've done on this.
What about treasure? Do your encounters or your exploration events, do they give you treasure? What is the point and purpose of treasure in this thing? If a monster has a gold coin pouch, for example, why? What does a monster need with gold? Now I understand maybe they've killed and eaten something that has gold. Maybe gold is valuable to a small sentient group for something. But why does it have gold? That's a good question to ask. Treasure doesn't have to be gold, though. Right? What are the things that can be treasure?
The armor, the weapons, spell books,
magic items,
potions,
spell-
magic items, all your loot.
things to help you along your way? Like, it's... But then again, things that help you along your way, why does the particular builder of this dungeon have that in his dungeon? Or her dungeon? Or its dungeon? Or their dungeon? I don't know.
Well, earlier we talked about if you have an encounter level or a tier, right? You should have a way to get through it. Well, maybe this guy is the one that has to go between the two tiers. So he's the one that has the scroll of endure elements for when he has to go into that super hot sauna section. And now you've got it so that when you get there, you're like, oh man, it's super hot in here. Oh, but we found that scroll. Let's use it. Kind of like you were talking about. We had this potion of get rid of armor. We haven't used it. Maybe this is the time. And you did it, and it worked great.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a good way to think about
So
that.
I would definitely drop useful items as treasure. Maybe not necessarily money, because unless money is your player's only motivation, they're going to have a hard time hauling it all down and back up, or up and then back down.
Yeah, I mean, for example, in Emerald Spire, I think we have money in there, but I remember going, what is money going to do? How am I going to go and buy anything? You really think anybody in here is going to sell me anything? Like, what? That didn't even make any sense. So at a certain point, I stopped. I mean, I think technically I'm counting it, but it was one of those logical, it doesn't make sense. Like, what am I going to use gold for down here? Whereas if I find cool stuff, yeah, absolutely. But it doesn't make any sense.
And we get to the encumbrance thing too. So you've got all this loot, all this treasure. Have you been dropping things as you've been getting things, or are you just pack muling it all? Do you have a Nodwick with you? Do you have a portable hole or a bag of holding that can do anything? And if so, then great. Then you can store all this stuff. But even those can fill up eventually. So if you've been traveling forever and you get a giant battering ram in there, well, okay, you've got room for it. But now you've got to reach in there and grab it, and it's just like having a credit card at that point. So do you even bother with money in the rest of your campaign?
Well, it depends on where the campaign is going. Like, for example, with the Emerald Spire, I'm having them play under Pathfinder Society rules. If you're playing under Pathfinder Society rules, as you complete certain levels, you are given the option to purchase items. But you're in the dungeon, how are you going to purchase those items? Well, the dungeon itself actually provides them a means, if they so choose, to teleport themselves to the top level, which they've already dealt with, leave, go back to town, buy what they need to, and come back and then teleport themselves right back to where they started.
So they've got spawn points.
They really do. Like, each part of the spire has the ability to be activated so you can teleport back and forth between the levels of the spire. I just said, instead of doing that, when you reach the end of a level, if you really need one, this mysterious man pops up and allows you to purchase these things. Because in society, you have that. Like, you just have the ability to, like, I've completed the scenario, you now can buy what's on your sheet and up to X amount before the next scenario.
I thought you meant in real life, as soon as you finish something, some man pops up and says, well, you want to buy this?
Well, it's...
I don't know where you live.
No, but it's in a fantasy world. Like, they step onto the platform of the next level, and there's a guy at a gift shop, like right there.
Disney World gift shop. Just add water. They're everywhere.
I mean, if they're needing justification, great. Otherwise, you left, you went to town, you bought the things, you came back, and you started over again. Like, it's just kind of how it goes. But
if you're playing a homebrew and it's not Pathfinder Society rules or D&D 5th Ed rules or whatever it is you're playing under, that's a practical question, which I can see people asking. Like, well, where am I going to buy stuff? Like, do I need money? I mean, that's something to think about. If your people can't get out, the door closed behind them, they can't get it open. The only way is to go forward. Hello, Fellowship of the Ring.
The only way out
Moria.
is up.
The only way out is up. The only way out is down. Whatever it is, then you better bear that in mind. Is everything that they need in there, or have you basically sentenced them to death?
Or,
I would advise
frankly,
against that.
Everything they want. That's
okay.
the other side, too, is that if you're going to play where the entire campaign takes place in said dungeon, like Rapanathik or... I guess the Emerald Spire, along those lines, if the entire thing is going to take place in this layer, as they level up, part of what makes a character more effective are the things that they can purchase or the treasure that they find. So they've got to be able to find the treasures that make them want to continue forward. They not only do they need the treasures to allow them to continue forward, you want to make them find the treasures that want them to continue forward.
But also be careful doing that. I think a lot of modern players have been trained that if there's a teleportation circle that takes you back to town, and if there are a bunch of chests with a bunch of weapons that are a little bit more advanced than that they're used to, they know something big is coming. So be careful with foreshadowing. I think especially video games are really guilty of telegraphing that this is what's coming next. And you may not want to do that. You might want to save that. Say, oh, here's a room over here. It's got a whole bunch of weapons in it. Here's a room over here. There's a teleportation circle in it. They are not connected. So you have to find one, then you can find the other, and then, oh, I found all this stuff. Let me go back to town, sell what I don't need anymore. I can, buy something that might be more useful where I'm going next.
Makes sense.
Do you throw stuff in that isn't useful in the hopes that it will throw them off, or is that going to be too discouraging?
Oh, by all
You know,
means.
Absolutely.
you had a bunch
It-
of
it-
fighters and you throw in a bunch of magic potions or scrolls that they can't use.
Anyone can use a potion.
Well, true. Scrolls, though, you have to be able to use magic device. So, sorry.
Scrolls and wands and rods.
Right. So just make it a pile for, that sorcerers and wizards put in there with your, the characters that can't use them, and then watch to see, do they take them and sell them? Do they take them and keep them in the hope that they'll find someone who can use them?
Well, in the fantasy, especially high fantasy, magic is present.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a party that is not big on magic or arcane, especially,
Mm-hmm.
I would wonder about that party. Are they missing someone, or did they all just decide to play fighter type characters?
Right.
And if they did, why are they playing a high fantasy game? Why aren't they
Right.
playing a more modern game?
Right. In that case, you'd just be a bunch of soldiers, and you'd be, yeah, that's true.
I mean, but if that's what they want to do, and that's what your group has decided to do,
Right.
then maybe you don't throw in a scroll. Maybe
Right.
you throw in a wand that has a success rate,
Right.
so you can just wave it really quickly, and maybe the Harry Potter thing works.
Right. Or as you say, a potion, which anybody can drink a potion, so which is nice. So, yeah, thinking about it more along that line.
And finally, when dealing with occupants, if there are more than one type on a particular tier, what is their synergy? What do they get along? So if you've got a Minotaur and you've got a giant spider, what are they doing for each other that the giant spider hasn't eaten the Minotaur? Okay, is the Minotaur eating all of its victims, or is it goring them, letting them walk out of its maze, and then the giant spider can then collect them, take it back up, and save them for later?
The logic behind why monsters that should not be together are together. We are really thinking about this a lot more than a lot of, I'm sure, because think about all the dungeons or layers you've been in that were probably randomly generated. Like this has, you found a potion of Featherfall. I am in a maze. Or
Thank
That
you,
just tells me
exactly.
that there is a trap floor somewhere.
Right.
right, but then
Or a previous adventure went in there, had a potion, it fell out of their bag. But like we learn in movie theory, if a director shows you something, probably going to come in later. If you find a potion of Featherfall, there is probably something around that it's going to be useful for. Maybe not in this tier, maybe in another tier.
But I do agree that there are times when it doesn't make sense. Like, why are these two creatures in here together? Like, why hasn't the one eaten the other? Why hasn't the one just left? Because this one doesn't. This is a solitary creature usually, and this is a pack creature. The solitary creature is going to be like deuces, or is going to kill the other creature. It isn't going to. And so things like that. There are times where I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So it does feel like someone just rolled a d20 and picked something out of the monster manual.
No, we all know that I'm a comic book guy, and has seen the Thor Ragnarok movie.
Yes.
So you know that in that particular storyline, there are a bunch of creatures that maybe don't necessarily get along, that aren't necessarily forced to work together, but it is in their best interest to work together.
Correct.
So if you can story the reason that they're working together, fine. You can have a couple of Fomorian or ant people working with a giant spider when they normally wouldn't. The giant spider would eat them and not think twice about it.
But if
Very
there's-
true.
Yeah. There's a benefit.
And that ends what I have to say about creatures or the occupants of a dungeon lair experience. What do you guys have? Anything else that you can think of that comes to mind?
One of my favorite situations actually was as a game master running through Rappahathic. The last time we played, Derek was kind of fed up with his character and could tell we were probably going to have a break soon, and he wanted, frankly, he committed a form of seppuku or suicide because they looked out over this cavern and found, he saw something moving in the water. It was a black pudding. Anyone that's ever dealt with a black pudding knows that when you do half damage, it splits in half and becomes two black puddings, and that just keeps happening until you got it down to one hit die before you can kill it. Like they get ridiculous. Well, he dives off this cliff down into the water that has this black pudding in it. If they'd have made it to the shore, there was a door to go to level 9. They were only level 4. They would have been murdered if they'd have made it into level 9 at that point. But it was like the other teammates were just sitting there wondering, you know, what in the world are we doing? What is that, a door down there? We need to just stay away from that. And then Derek's character goes careening off the cliff right into the water. For a black pudding, which they live in dark, watery places. Like, it totally made sense what they were doing there.
Right.
And Rapid Athletics is just full of all these different creatures as it is. But for the most part, everything makes sense. And that particular one made a lot more sense than I would have expected and turned so horrible so fast that it was hilarious. And I never am out to watch a character die by any means, but I knew that's what he was trying to do. And it worked, to say the least.
So what happened when he dove in?
He dove in, and though his party tried from range to try and shoot this thing, and they saw what was happening to the pudding, though Derek was fighting, like his character was fighting to try and survive. Like, his game master brain knew he was not going to survive this on his own. And the party didn't even bother jumping in after him because they didn't know what it was. They were just shooting at the thing attacking their buddy. It was hilarious.
I was a paladin that was going to sink. I think my swim was a neg 4. So I'm pretty sure, because I was thinking about it, I was like, I'm going to dive in and I'm going to die. Like, that's what's going to happen because I can't even swim. You know, at least his character, I think I had like 2 or 3 in swim at least. I didn't have anything. I'm like, this is going to be bad. And so at that point it was, well, do we all jump in after him and die with him? Because we didn't understand why he dove in. That was the part that, again, we could actually play, the people could play as the characters completely confused because we're all trying to avoid the badness that's down there. Like, we probably shouldn't go in there. And he just goes flying off the cliff. And we're like, what did he just do? Like, Deb is asking, what did you just do to Derek? But I'm totally, can do this in character as well as I'm screaming down at him from the cliff. What did you just do? So in that moment, reality and fantasy were the same thing because I was totally lost. I'm like looking at Josh like, is this gonna really, like, seriously? He just did that? And Josh is gonna like, oh, apparently. So, yeah, it totally, the creature being in there totally made sense. And then, but I still never really understood why he leapt off the cliff. But that was on Derek. That wasn't part of the dungeon.
Correct. It was not his character doing that.
It was Derek the person.
It was nice to be part of a dungeon that, like, gave the character exactly what they wanted.
Their death.
That, from what I understand, that dungeon is designed to give many player characters exactly that.
There is a tally sheet in the back of the book for the character that dies, what time they died. Like,
do you get extra points for TPKs?
I don't know. I don't know. It's vicious. They recently updated it to 5th edition, by the way, for those that are interested.
Very cool. Anything else, Deb? Any insights for inhabitants of layers?
Nope. Just like I said, just have it make sense. That's the part that gets me. You're in an area that's hardly got any oxygen, and yet you've got all these creatures in here that obviously breathe oxygen. How are they living for more than 2 minutes? Like, what? Doesn't make any sense. If you've got it built in, if it's a puzzle to solve, puzzle it away. But if it's just cause, no, there is no just cause. Things don't, things don't magically happen. Yes, things magically happen. There should be a reason behind everything that happens. You should be able to explain it if you're like, it just happened that way.
DM Fiat.
Yeah. I'm like, no. Just, no. You're done. Go home. Think about what you just did, and then come back and then keep playing this game, is what happens. Or I don't have a lot of desire to keep playing, because I'm like, if anything can just happen, then he can just TPK us in a second. So I'm not going to worry about it. I like there to be a reason.
Very cool. All right. Then moving from the things that are in the dungeon to the things moving into the dungeon, let's talk about dungeon mastering. First thing, you want to talk about your players. What is the level that they start at? That will inform your encounters that you have, the challenge ratings at the beginning, as well as how things progress. So, do you start them off as level 1 and they're brand new adventurers and they're going in there and this is going to be the thing that makes their bones? Or are they already high level and the reason that they're there is because they've been hired because they're the subject matter experts? They're the ones that are the go-to dragon slayer, treasure hunters, whatever.
Of Doom.
And biscuits, yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I feel like a broken record. This is a story.
Rinse and repeat.
If you are a set of adventurers who come into town to find out that this Dracolich or this Lich has started killing people, you're the people that are going to get hired, right? And that, I mean, I missed the question, didn't I?
No, you're there. It's just if you're low level,
If I'm a
and
level
it's
1, no one's going to hire
Dracolich
me for everything.
That's being the big problem.
They're
I'm
not going to
leaving
look
that
to you.
town.
Well, true, but they're not going to look to you. Like the
Right.
people are not going to look to you.
No,
you
you
just
could-
got there.
You could be the little guy of, I'm going to do it, and everyone's laughing at you, the David versus Goliath scenario. You could totally do that. That means you got to trust your party enough that they're going to raise their swords and be like, we will go after and defeat the thing, even though it could be our certain doom. If you know your players and you know that's how they're going to play, cool. But they could be like, Dracolich, no, I'm sitting down and I'm drinking a beer.
Do you let them know that it's a Dracolich, or do you just let them know that hey, the town's having some problems? If you're interested in making a name for yourself, or making a little extra cash, or maybe you're interested in marrying the chieftain's daughter, and the chieftain's daughter will only marry the person that can bring peace to the land, well, now you have some motivation.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to let them know that the Dracolich is what's doing it.
And it's going to eat them alive. But, just keep that a secret.
The hook to getting them into the lair is crucial to the lair being successful. It's the element of why is probably the most important question through all of this. And even Deb said that's got to make sense. I got to know why I'm doing something. I got to know why that person's in there. I got to know why these people are working together. There are some players who don't care. I just want to go in and kill it and take its treasure.
Right.
Yeah. But honestly, that's why they're there.
Like
Because
murder hobos? Is that
murder hobo?
that a
Yeah,
word?
that's the word.
Okay.
If you have not heard Mikey Mason's Murder Hobos, number 1, it's not family friendly, but number 2, it's hilarious. But the reasoning why, you got to be able to pull somebody. You got to be able to pull somebody into the lair with a good reason. Sometimes that good reason is a wormhole just opened up and you got sucked in. Now, why in the world and who has the ability to open up wormholes? Your wizard's certainly going to be interested.
Yeah. Or terrified.
Or I need to leave now. Like a teleportation ring that tricks half your players to go to the other side of the dungeon level you're on, while the other players just leave them be. That happened the last time they played the Emerald Spire. That was sort of funny, and yet everyone survived. But that's because I'm a nice game master. That's
No, let's clarify. He didn't want to kill his wife in the game. Let's be clear on that.
without
The
permission.
face that he's making tells me that might not be true.
No, that was true. It was. I
Okay.
didn't want to kill her.
Because I was the one that
I didn't
got
want
stuck
to.
up by myself, and he was like,
But I'm looking at this situation going, you better be smarter, because if not, it's going to smash you. But they're in there because they think they're going to find out this information and help this particular town. But more than that, that group's in there for glory. Like, they are in there to say that they have conquered the Emerald Spire.
Okay.
But why? It's so important.
Well, once you've motivated them to go in, now you have to motivate them to keep going.
Yes.
And Deb hit one of them earlier. You close the door behind them, and there's only one way out. And you either live or you don't. That's
simple
one way.
yet effective.
If all they want to do is kill things and rack up the XP, that's great. If you have a whole bunch of encounterable things. But that gets boring really quickly for especially GMs.
Yeah.
Because they want, typically, there to be some kind of challenge. And if it's all about, well, I throw the thing at you and you kill it, then it becomes a game of what can I throw at you that you can't kill?
Yeah.
And then that's no fun for the players because they want to be the thing killing. It's and that's going to come to the balance of experience. How do you balance experience with both encounters or traps, puzzles? Do you give experience for traps and puzzles? Or do you say the experience you get is the next thing, the next room, or you find the thing that you need? That's the experience you get.
That depends on the trap. If you survive a falling pit, a spike pit trap, you deserve a little bit of experience because those suck. But I know exactly what you mean. I do, because they're especially puzzles. Puzzles are some of the best ways to provide information to a set of players. As a game master, even just this, was it race car or rainbow or something along those lines? One of the first times Deb and I had a game with Derek, and he threw out this puzzle, a word puzzle, and I remember Anton within a couple minutes solving it.
Like when we did my 0 level campaign with you, you're like, it's this because of Lance.
I'm like, it has to do with Gary Gygax. I can't figure out what the E is, but I know it's Gary Gygax. But it provided so much information, and it can be used later. And it's just, whether it's experience or not, that information is crucial to the success of whatever story is going on. Make sure when you provide a puzzle like that, though, that the information is actually useful instead of like Rosebud. It was the sled. So, how important is that to the situation?
Anticlimactic there.
It's very much.
So, a bit of advice for this, and we haven't gotten to that section yet, but have something for everyone to do. You've got the players that all they want to do is fight. You've got some players, I know if Deb's in my party, I'm going to throw in a question that you have to know or be able to research the answer to. Because that gets her away from her knitting needles and at least onto her phone.
So sad and yet so true. Because I'm like, nope, I already know the answer to that. I can just keep knitting. As opposed to, wait a minute. I don't know. I should know that. I don't know why I should know that, but I should know that.
And see,
like,
even in this scenario, she has put down the knitting needle and went to her phone.
And went, look, there's stuff on my phone. I don't know, but yeah, you get
or
the
you
idea.
could have another player that if that player gets bored, their player character will run off and do something.
Yeah.
I'm married to one.
Mm-hmm.
If
So
she's
true.
bored, then
she will entertain herself.
Well, all right, this is taking too long. I throw a bomb at it.
Yep.
Or I leave and I go do this other thing.
Right.
Well, now you've left your party in a quandary. Do we chase after you and encourage that behavior?
Right.
Or do we stay here and then you die and there's no fun for you and then we're down one person and this thing was scaled for a 6-person party of 5th level characters?
Right.
True.
GMs need to be aware of all these types of things.
Right. Often, I mean, that's one of the biggest things where I find, and I don't know if the word rhythm is right, if timing comes into this one too, because if you're in a situation where one player is effectively neutralized for whatever reason, they can't fight it, they can't think it through, they can't spell it, they can't, whatever. They were knocked down, and now they're down to 0 hit points, and they're dying. They're not dead yet. So they make one roll. That's it. Okay, well, now you effectively, since that person is not actively involved, now the player, and there are some personalities who, no, I'm still in it. I'm still totally like, okay, what are you doing next? I don't care if I'm almost dead. What do you do next? But then there are others who are like, well, I can't do anything. Like, I'm okay.
Yeah,
I'm going to go over here and now.
I could have spent 3 hours doing something else.
Exactly. There's 100 other things I could do, or then, the
Like
person
Mask
picks
the
up their
Living
knitting
God.
and, now I pick up my crochet and I just sit and I crochet until I'm awake or I'm alive or something because I can't do anything else. Well, you don't want that alienation of that one player for whatever reason. So I agree. Whatever room you're in, is there something for everybody to do? And sometimes that requires thinking on your feet because sometimes you may not realize that in that room somebody is... You don't necessarily have all your players stats and all their crazy stuff memorized, you may not realize that player is effectively like, I can't do anything. Like, I've done that before where I've looked down, and it happened once in a game with Derek. I remember this because it really frustrated me because I was all trying to be in it, and it was Ziri, who was my knowledge, my Google character. She was all knowledges. She was a lore oracle, so she was knowledge everything. Well, in this particular situation, it was fight it. I had nothing that would fight it. Like, it had enough resistances that whatever I used did nothing. So now Josh and I forget who else at the time, Josh and Tony, I don't remember, were wailing on the thing, as Ragger, I think. Anyway, and I'm just sitting there. Like, literally, there's nothing I can do. I did my knowledge thing initially, rolled like a 60, told him all sorts of stuff. That was it. Like, I was nothing I could do. And so at that point, I was like, you let me know if you need me to do something. Exactly. And then it was one of those, I think I started like looking through the player handbook, or I was on my phone or something, because I'm like, there's nothing else I can do here. And so then the next encounter, when that similar situation happened, we were still in the same area. Derek specifically had, I forget if it was a machine or it was something that Ziri could do every turn for knowledge. She had to roll a knowledge check to get this thing to do some sort of an attack. So, like, it would attack for her based upon how she figured out how to use the machine. I think something like that. So it was at least something for me to do that would do damage so that I could join in. And so he rolled with the punches, and the next time he had an option for me. So doing that, giving your players an option of something they can do, is vital. Even if it's that they roll a knowledge and all of a sudden another party gets a magical revelation from heaven above of something, at least they're doing something to be able to help and move the story forward.
I don't have any more on that.
All right. Then the last thing I have in Dungeon Mastering is skill checks versus role play. Do you have them actually try the thing, or do you just have them roll the dice and say, I've got this, I've got this? For example, you've got a puzzle where they have to speak a word, but the word is in a language that nobody understands. Do they role play that out and they try sounding it out because someone knows a language that's close to that, or do you just say, I roll a linguistics check and blah?
I think there's got to be a balance. Linguistics, particularly in Pathfinder, is a great go-to for something like that. That's exactly why you have that skill. But then again, with a puzzle, you're trying to read it, and if you're trying to put in front of it, look, guys, this is a puzzle. Like, you have skill checks that can help you, but this is a puzzle. You can figure this out. And sometimes there are going to be times you're like, you're not going to be able to make the check. You're going to have to do it with your experience. And then someone will argue rules lawyer this, rules lawyer that, and they're like, look, that's not what this is. This is a puzzle. You're supposed to have fun with it and try and solve the puzzle. That is important on both game master and player sides. If a game master throws to you a puzzle and wants you guys to solve it as people and not as your characters, do it. It's okay. But on the same point, game masters, they're putting these points into skills to use those skills. Give them the opportunity to use those skills.
I agree. I was going to say, I think it depends on your players, because you may have some players, if you've got a table full of introverts that none of them are really that great at talking and it's a diplomacy check, they're all going to be sitting there feeling really awkward and really like, I don't even know what to say. I'm going to sound like an idiot in front of everybody else. And then you have that awkward silence that nobody wants at a game table. As opposed to the other way, you had a table full of extroverts. Well, now it's almost the other way around. Are they all going to talk at the same time? Dear Lord, help us. We're going to be here for 6 days while they all diplomacy this thing. Whereas if you've got a party that's got 1 or 2 outspoken, you got 3 or 4 that are quieter, then I think it might be worth the role play aspect of it. You tell me what you would say. And, or you could do a combination. Roll it, and then you start talking, and I'll give you bonuses based upon what you put into that as the player ad-libbing it.
Great. What does that sound like is a really good line that some GMs I've had said.
Yes. So what would that sound like if you were telling him
you're,
this?
You're doing this thing. What's that sound like?
Right. How are show me your tone. Show me, yeah.
You might not have an actor or a singer in your group, and no, I don't really want to do this. I'm here to role play. I don't want to do the thing.
Right.
Also, something along the lines of what you said, Josh, when you take it out of the realm of the game and into the realm of the players themselves, that's fine. But metagaming is the opposite of that, where you have the players who know something and they're using it in the game. We talked about that with the Gary Gygax thing. That gets less fun for the storyteller, for the GM.
True.
Because you guys are cheating, and it's obvious. Or when someone goes to their phone and, oh, I know this. Well, that's great, but your character doesn't have Google.
Right, exactly.
So how does it know that?
How
Can
does
you
your
tell
character
me
know that?
How your character knows
Right.
that. Otherwise, you've just given away a big thing because you were bored.
Right. All right.
So watch out for that. And another thing you can do, phones off the tables. If you need it for something, we can all stop and look it up, and then phones off the table again.
Yep.
Yeah. You can't say you can't bring your phone because life. But you can say, all right, this is a game where I want you to have your character do the thing.
But you have to be prepared that people will have something to do. Because I think I was in a game once where it was phones off the table, and it did, but it ended up there was a point where there was nothing going on because I think the party had split and people were doing stuff, and our group was in the holding pattern that happens when you have a split party. That's another reason not to split the party. From a practical standpoint, yes, the usual, you die easier. Okay, yes, that's true. But from a practical standpoint, the GM can only run one group at a time. And so if that group is not you, you're staring at a wall, possibly, if you're not allowed to touch your phone, or you're knitting, unless your knitting needles are not allowed either, in which case you're just standing there and you're really bored. And then you start nitpicking what the other groups do, because I've never seen that happen. And then you start, well, you should just do this to them, because they were the ones that ran off from us. We were minding our own business, and they just started going off and threw the bomb over there and ran after
You're
them.
giving the storyteller DM ideas, and then if he uses it, the players are mad at you. But
Correct. Exactly. Well, you ran off, so you probably should have thought of that before you decided to run off, and now you got problems. Problems not good. So that's another reason to keep the party together. Everyone is involved with the movement of the story.
And that brings me to the end of that, and we're worked on the very end of this. You've gone through, you've built this dungeon, but what's the payoff? What's the final climax? Whoever built it, are they still there? Is it their thing? Or is there a boss fight? If there is, was there a MacGuffin that you needed to go get before you could fight them? Is that in the dungeon, in the lair, that sort of thing? Tell me about a boss fight. Why is that important?
The final payoff.
You want to feel like what you've been doing for the last however many levels, the points that you put into it, the cool stuff that you've gotten, the near-death experiences you've had. You want to put all of that into your final hurrah, basically. I mean, you pick these things for a reason, I hope. I hope you didn't just pick them randomly. And you are using these skills and your stuff for a reason. You want everyone to be able to have everyone wants the last hurrah. It's movie, right? Isn't that the movie story? Every movie is going to end with something big. Now, either it's a really intense intellectual scene, or it's a really emotional scene, or it's a lot of explosions if you're in a Marvel movie, or it's Batman does something insane and you don't know if he's going to make it, whatever. Something big at the end. I mean, that's how entertainment basically works these days. If it was just okay, you did it, you're done. Most of us feel pretty let down at that. Like, that was it.
You left a little wiser, if not a little poorer.
Exactly. Bye. And you're like, no, that can't be it. There's no way. No. You are totally fooling it. There's something going on. Somebody's going to jump out and go boo. I mean, that's what's going to happen. That's what you're instinctually wanting in an entertainment. But you want it to pay off. And I'm thinking about one in particular, and this was not the GM's fault. So you as a player, we're talking to players too. As a player, have to think about that as well in that boss fight. That you want all of your compatriots. I hope you want all of your compatriots, unless you're just mean, in which case maybe you should be playing by yourself. Go sit in the corner with your toys. But your fellow players to enjoy it too. And I can think of one boss fight where basically the one character, I will not mention a name, one-shotted the bad guy because he had one skill or an ability, I guess, that let him just one-shot it. And it really took the wind out of my sails. Maybe nobody else cared, but it took the wind out of my sails because I was like, really? That's it? I didn't get to do anything. Literally. And it was kind of disappointing for me. Now, was it cool for him? Well, yeah, absolutely. It was cool for him. But at the same time, it was like, okay. I went through all the effort too, and I didn't even get a piece of him. All right. And so that's not very fair. So as a GM, if you think you have a player that's going to be in there and may try to take all of that final thunder for him or herself, you might have a backup option. Like, okay, let's say they do one-shot this colossal red dragon. Maybe there's someone here who can do it. Well, then you throw in something that she can't get, like that is immune to stuff, or that only that you'll need a knowledge check from somebody else. Like, think through, if somebody does really decide to munchkin this end, is there another way the other players can also shine in that final battle?
It's the story has been the thread that ties all of this together from the beginning, and every story should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if the end of the dungeon is a boss fight, or this major revelation, or this super sacrifice that has to happen, it needs to be one final culmination, something that ultimately most players are going to remember the ending before they remember the entire journey. The journey's important, but the ending is what sticks.
And things should point in that direction. Like, if you have a certain number of monsters, a certain level of traps, they should all have something that tells you that this is what the end is. Okay? You can hear growling in the distance, and it gets louder, and it seems more pained as you get closer to that end thing. It's foreshadowing that this is coming, and it's going to be big. And lastly, the final word on this, you're going to prepare a whole lot of stuff, and your players might not even see a third of it. But if they ask the question, why this, at least you'll have the answer to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I enjoyed that. A lot more information came out of that than I expected, but I think it was fun. I hope it was useful.
I thought it was very
And
build a dungeon and let us know. Send me a copy of your dungeon. You can find me on Facebook or send it to the Established Facts, and they'll get a hold of it.
that'd be fantastic. We may, in the future, explore actually building a dungeon as well. We have actually started ourselves, but due to the way the first and second episode went, it didn't happen this time, but it may happen in the future. So I hope you listened to part 1 in episode 195, and I hope you've enjoyed episode 196. On episode 195, we established, when exploring a dungeon looking for an encounter, you should hope to encounter an encounter worth exploring.
There's a lot of ease.
It is. I typed it up a couple different times because I kept messing it up. Like, I knew what I wanted to say when it came to me, but this one was a little bit easier. Our established fact for episode 196: wizards are terrified of wormholes unless they make sense.
Nice. Well done.
Thank you all for listening to us. And again, as Don would say, we shall catch you.
Gen Con stuff should be coming out soon, right?
PopCon will. But you mean Gen Con registrations
Yeah.
in May? Yeah, you're
Reg.
right.
Be
Yeah.
very
Make
close
sure- yeah.
attention.
Paying
Make
close
sure you're
attention.
looking at those every day. Get in there before it sells out.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know Breakfast Anytime actually just got approved for a show at Gen Con.
Did it?
Thursday night,
Awesome.
7 o'clock.
Thursday night at 7?
Yep.
Okay.
Ooh, isn't that in the middle of the special?
Yep.
It might be one of the specials, yes, but we had I
might
had to
be.
throw out a day. Friday's usually the big special. So I had to throw
Okay.
us out a date because it was like I just wanted us to get a show. I didn't even care what time, but we got approved for Thursday at 7. So I was like, okay, cool. That's where we're at right now. So anyways, as I said, I hope you enjoyed, and we will catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Wayne.
Bye. Please visit us at www.theestablishedfacts.com and our Facebook page, facebook.com/theestablishedfacts. If you would like to support us by buying some merchandise, visit cafepress.com/castingrobot.
Bonus